Hello and welcome to Wine Wednesdays. I'm Freddie Arredondo, winemaker at Cave B Estate Winery, and behind the camera is Carrie Arredondo, our marketing and events manager. And Cave B, in case you're not familiar with who we are or where we are located, our main facility is in Quincy, Washington, which is where all of our grapes are grown. We're directly adjacent to the Gorge Amphitheater, and we also have tasting rooms in Woodinville and in Tri-Cities. Today I'm going to pour our Cabernet Sauvignon. We actually make two styles of Cabernet Sauvignon. This is our standard Cabernet Sauvignon, and we also make an Old Vines Cabernet Sauvignon, which is made from vines planted in 1985. So this year, those vines are 36 years old. So wow, they got some age on them. Anyway, what are our questions this week, Carrie?
Yeah, thanks, Freddie. So these questions come from Rose, and Rose's first question is, what are tannins?
Good question. So tannins, and actually this is a great wine to talk about tannins. Tannins are a compound found in wines and actually found all over nature, not just in wines. They're found in all kinds of vegetative forms. In wine specifically, they're found in the grape stems, skins, and seeds. So in red wines, you're going to find more tannins because red wines ferment on the skin. So as the wine is fermenting, it's extracting tannins from the skins. So tannins, just a quick explanation, they're kind of what give the wine kind of the drying effect on the palate. So think of it like spinach is one of those things that has a lot of tannins. And if you eat raw spinach, it kind of leaves a little bit of a tackiness on your palate. Also bananas. You know the little strings that hang off of bananas? If you take one of those little strings and pop it in your mouth and just chew on it, that is just straight tannin. So think of that as what the compound is that's coming into wine. The reason that we have more in reds, again, is because of the skin contact. And the reason Cabernet in particular has more tannins than some other reds is because of the skin to juice ratio. Basically, Cabernet Sauvignon is teeny tiny little berries. The berries on Cabernet Sauvignon are small. So with that, you have a lot more skin to a lot less juice. And as such, you have a lot more tannin extraction.
Thank you, Freddie, for that great explanation. The second part of Rose's question was, you answered this a little bit already. Do some wines have tannins and others don't? Can you explain maybe a little bit in terms of like white wines and red wines?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess all wines have some tannin. Now the difference is, are those perceptible tannins or not? And again, Cabernet Sauvignon, great example of wines that typically are fairly tannic. A lot of people use the misnomer and call it dry. Dryness is actually a reference to the absence of sugar. So it just means that the wine is all of the sugar has been metabolized by yeast and transformed into alcohol. So dryness is actually not the correct term to use when you're referring to tannins. Tannin should be referred to as astringent, or even chewy, sometimes people refer to it as. But astringency is what tannins are. And most whites don't really have much tannin because they're typically just pressed right away and then the juice is fermented, whereas reds are fermented on the skins, so you have a lot more tannins in reds in general. There are a few exceptions in whites. There are some whites that have some skin contact in fermentation, and there are some whites where tannins are just so loosely bound that they do come out when you press. Semillon is a great example of that.
Wonderful, thank you. And the last part of Rose's question was, why are tannins important in winemaking?
That's a really important part of the question. Yeah, so tannins are important in winemaking because in reds, we all know that reds typically age better than white wines. The biggest contributing factor to that is tannins. Tannins and how they work with acidity and how they work with color. Tannins essentially act as an antioxidant. So they actually help to trap any oxygen molecule that might be in solution. So when they're tightly bound to that oxygen molecule, as the tannins start breaking down and the wine starts aging, that oxygen molecule will then come free, or there's a little bit of oxygen infiltration through the cork sometimes too, in that microoxygenation exchange between the closure and the wine itself. So tannins are actually hugely important for ageability, and they're also important for texture. and giving the wine body and structure on the palate. We use those terms a lot: texture, body, structure. It's basically the feeling that it gives your mouth. So basically, in a lot of white wines that are fermented in tank, you have a lot of fruit. You have some nice crisp acidity on the finish, but you might not have a lot of after effect and the kind of feeling on the palate that just kind of lingers. And that's what tannins offer. Tannins offer that kind of lingering effect on the palate. So yeah, thanks for the questions, and come hit us up next week.
So, Freddie, before we finish up here, I know you brought the Cabernet Sauvignon today specifically because I let you know what Rose's questions were ahead of time here. Do you have just a moment to explain us to a little bit what you're tasting with our which year is that, the Cab?
This is the 2017.
The 2017.
So
yeah, let us know a little bit in the last moment here.
So the 2017, it's still a pretty young wine, but it's showing nicely right now. It's very drinkable right now out of the bottle. I would recommend decanting this, or if you don't have a decanter, a cool little trick that I like to show people is, I have fat thumbs, so this works, but if you don't have fat thumbs like me, after you open the bottle and pour a little bit out, you can put the cork back in, and then if you don't have a really cool decanter to decant it, you can do this. I'm going to show you with my thumbs. You just shake it up, and that helps to oxygenate the wine, and it helps to give it a breath of fresh air, and it just opens it up. The same thing can be accomplished by when you put the wine in your glass. When we swirl the glass, that's not just for effect and because it looks cool. It does look cool, don't get me wrong, but that's not the only thing we're doing. We're actually opening the wine up, we're exposing it to oxygen and letting those volatile aromas come out of the glass. So this wine right now, like I said, it's still young, pretty tightly wound, but as we give it some oxygen and give it some air, it's got some huge, beautiful cherry notes coming out. The oak is really nice and subtle. There's some new French oak on this, a little bit of new American oak. New oak on this is only about 30%, so not a whole lot of brand new oak, and then the rest is neutral. I really like to use very little new oak because I like to showcase what the vineyards do. But anyway, that's our cab.
Thank you very much, Freddie. Thank you, Rose. And thank you guys for taking the time to listen to our Wine Wednesday questions. We'll be here again next week. If anybody has any comments or questions for next week, please comment below or go ahead and shoot us an email at info@cavebee.com, or you can send a DM and that comes to me. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.